Leadership is taking people on a journey where there's a vision, guidance and purpose.
Good leaders lead with the heart as well as the head.
Leadership means doing the right thing for the right reason, no matter how difficult it might be.
You're listening to Leadership Unwrapped, a podcast where you will hear from people who are living leadership every day. Really enjoyed that conversation with Bidita, Niamh. It's gotten me thinking, like I said, when we were talking to her a bit tangentially about how we're looking for new ways of thinking about leadership, she's really onto something. I was really struck with even thinking about what we can learn from family and how family leads, and how we can learn from Indigenous cultures about leadership. Like she's so right. She's just really onto something.
Yeah, I guess sometimes we talk about different ideas or perspectives on leadership as if they're completely new as well. And, you know, there's groups of people who have been working and living in this way for centuries that sometimes, you know, we don't look at it that way to gain that perspective. And yeah, but we're a bit disconnected maybe in the way that we're thinking about it. We're sort of thinking about it more in terms of themes and theories as opposed to lived every day. And maybe that's the way we need to go in a world that's in crisis. Maybe that's what we need to go back to, is that whole just how we are as human beings in relationship with each other. Totally want to go to Bangladesh now, I have to say. I'm listening to her as well. She's definitely got the bug. I really want, and about travel, I want to go. And it's that experiential piece, isn't it? Like that really stood out to me as well, about how Bidita talks about leadership. Like it's really that lived leadership piece, isn't it? And I guess that's what you're saying as well about the disconnect, that sometimes we're really thinking about it in more of the theoretical sense than the lived sense or the practice of it. Yeah. I bet if you're in her class, it must be amazing. Oh, stop. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I just get a sense you'd really feel that you were included and that you had something to offer. I think it would be just, she probably, I bet she's amazing. Yeah, you just get that sense from her when you meet her. It's the human-centered piece of the way, and I know, you know, in fairness, lots of people we've spoken to, we've been incredibly lucky that we've had this, but that human-centered piece about the ways she talks about leadership is just incredible. I think it's a really eye-opening conversation. Yeah, especially what's going on in the world today. We need more of it and more of it, I think. I'm definitely on the same page. So listeners, I really hope you get something from it, because you're probably picking up that we did. And I just definitely can't wait to meet her in the summer and continue the conversation. It's definitely you're going to see it coming through in my work, no doubt. Yeah, brilliant. Enjoy. Bidita Sadiq is an international baccalaureate IB teacher for Language A, which is English, and Theory of Knowledge teacher in London, an examiner for Language A in the IB, and an IB workshop leader. Bidita has worked in the US, Southeast Asia, and of course now in England. Her research interest is leadership and education, specifically in Bangladesh, and she's presented at various conferences, including the IB Global Conference in San Diego on feedback and student agency, and the 2022 Summit Annual Conference focusing on the pursuit of a sustainable future in Bangladesh in Dhaka. In Bidita's spare time, she reads many history books on royalty, World War I and its interyears. She is also a massive fan of the Rolling Stones and of old Hollywood movies. So we have that in common for sure, Bidita. Thank you so much for joining us, Bidita. I know we've been in conversations about doing this for a little while, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and we're delighted to have you with us.
Delighted. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. Fabulous. So we often start off by just asking people to just tell us a little bit about your journey. Why leadership? What interests you about it?
Because I've been working in schools most of my life and as a teacher, and I actually like being a teacher. So when I went into leadership, and I went into leadership in terms of leading my department in the most unusual way. They had sacked someone and I needed to come in because I was the next best choice, but I had no training. So it was kind of like baptism by fire. And this was in the early days before we had Google and internet. So I was in the library getting out big books and leadership. What should I be doing? How should I be listening? So it was trial and error. I had to learn sort of hands-on. And then when I did my MEd, it was great. I learned a lot about leadership, but I think one of the, maybe I'll use the word failings, was that I learned only about Western leadership style in terms of transformational leadership, ethical leadership, distributed leadership, etc. within a Western context, Horatio Nelson, Brian Clough, all these great people that, contributed so much to history. But is that the only leadership style? And I was intrigued that what about things like indigenous leadership? What can we learn from tribes in the Amazon? I have in Bangladesh many tribes there that live on the coastal lines and in villages. You also have the Rohingya, who are refugees. They have camps. What about leadership there? How does that look like? So, I mean, one of the things I read in Forbes, actually, just before we're having this, is that indigenous worldview, I read, that can really reshape how business see themselves, because they have this sense of community. And that got me thinking, because I'm also bilingual in Bengali. So sometimes I think in English and think in Bengali at the same time, is that there are 25 words for leader in Bengali.
Wow.
25 words. So it can't mean one thing. So I was fascinated by that. And also fascinated by the fact that we've had a history of British rule break in 1947 with the birth of Pakistan, then in 1971 with Bangladesh. So what happens when we're culturally displaced? How does leadership look like then? So I felt that those were areas that I was fascinated by, but had never been taught or exposed to. And a great example of this was when the Asian community was expelled by Idi Amin in 1972. You had about 27,000 Ugandans coming into Britain, but they're one of the most successful ethnic communities here because the concept of family, working together. How does that work in leadership? They didn't, well, when they came here, they were essentially refugees. So now they are working to build their lives, but they've been successful. How? They didn't have the time to go to university. Well, they did when they were back in Kenya, but when they were here, they had to get on with it. You had to survive, but they made it, and they made it through hard work, but through learning about family, commitment, community, and forging ahead with that. And sometimes the matriarch, the mother, would be the central leader role informally in the family. She would be informal in terms of leadership, but certainly a powerful force. And I was really taken aback by the quote that one of the Ugandan refugees, he's probably in his 70s now, he said, "It is simple. When something is stolen from you, then you fight hard to get it back." And we were focused on that. And we led with the support of our family and our community. And I just thought that was quite powerful.
And that has influenced your research now? Is that embedding in what you're looking at now and the way that you're speaking about leadership?
Yes, I'm really thinking about looking at ways in which certain words that we use in courses here don't translate in a subcontinent culture, in Bengali culture. And as I said, if you have 25 words for leader, then what does that mean? So when we have one word here, leader, we generally put it under the umbrella of leader of this or that, but there's specific names for specific types of leaders. So how are the kind of interested in, is the approach the same? Do they, what are the variations? So it really just influenced me to learn more about how do we conceptualize leadership when we are in a community that is essentially born out of anger and war and colonization and displacement. What can we learn from this? And even now, Friday, for example, is a prayer day in Bangladesh. You don't go to work, but Friday in other parts of the world, you'd be working. So again, you have religion or faith as being a priority. And so you don't work on a Friday, but you work on a Sunday. That's your Monday, when other parts of the world are shut. But that's what they want to do. And it's the same in Middle Eastern countries as well. So it's interesting how it shifts your mind on how you lead, how you build business, how you communicate with, what negotiations do they have when Bangladesh is working on a Sunday and we're closed? How does that work?
Yeah. I'm fascinated at the thought of there being 25 words that mean leader. I'm really fascinated by that. And you say there's words, so there's a word that you said was a bit more, if I picked you up right, like a bit more generally a leader, and then types of leaders. Would you tell us a little bit more about it?
So
really
there's a word called neta, and neta from, now my Bengali is sort of as a second language, but neta, as my father told me, is really about somebody who's patriotic and leads their country. So you're a citizen, a neta, but it's also a leader. Then you've got dolpati, which is another word for leader, but the word dol means group. So you can see these little variations. Now, I don't remember all 25 of them, but dol, by being group, means inclusive.
Yeah.
But the word stands for leader. So really, this kind of Asian conceptualization of leadership is quite, they really want to think about, well, what does it mean in context to what we're doing? So I just think that the exertion of influence, I mean, of course, you have a leader at university or schools, you have a headmistress, but the whole premise is that you have a language that is so rich, so phonetic, and you've got these 25 words that mean leader. So how are we, does it mean that Dolpati means inclusive, but Neta means citizenship? So do we look at leadership in two different ways? So I'm still learning about that. And it links back to, I think, colonial history as well, because you were India, Mughal Empire, then British India, then India and Pakistan, and then Bangladesh. So you've had several stages of your identity, and surely through that, with colonization, you've had a person who is not from your culture leading you. And then now you are an independent country in 1971, and you're still, if you think about it, it's a very new country. It's over 50 years old. So leadership is still evolving.
Yeah, that it's very contextual, I think, in the way that that this is getting us to think about leadership. And I also love that it's not static. It's responsive to whatever what's ever happening in that moment. So yeah, that this idea that we have static thinking on leadership doesn't really help us, because depending on the context and the problem and the issue in a given moment, you may be different in that moment than in another moment, because whatever you need to solve that particular issue is the piece you lean into in that moment. So I think the 25 words probably captures that dynamic, responsive piece in some way as I'm listening to you.
And I wonder if all 25 are used. Maybe not, but the fact that it exists. And I think that would make assumptions when I was doing my MEd that all these factors are in place. That is, you get a set lunchtime, it's a working day, there are set meals, etc. But that doesn't quite work in Bangladesh. It's different. It's a hot, humid country. You would stop work about 2:00 and go home for a siesta. But life goes on. Schools are functioning, businesses are running. But this concept of leadership, and now, of course, with Bangladesh, the digital age, is still unequal in terms of economic status. So not everybody has a laptop or access, but even in villages, what are those clusters of leadership? What do they look like? Who has that power? How does it happen? are one of those 25 words applied in the village there. So when I went to Bangladesh and I was working with the University of Liberal Arts there, and did a small presentation on leadership and distributed leadership, they were kind of like, well, who's in charge? And it was trying to get them to think about what they can offer, their expertise, which just because they're not in formal leadership, they actually have a quality that is really important that they could lead with. But what I realized was, because I was using the word leader in its English form, that's the only definition they understand. Is that, well, what does that mean? Am I on top?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah, and distributive leadership is quite complex, isn't it? Really, when you think about how do we build the capacity of others to make, and Niamh talks about this. I'm speaking for her now. Sorry about that, Niamh. But we talk about how do we build the capacity of others, and not just in a tokenistic way, but that they're decision makers too. And there's almost like a partnership in working together in that group, that doll that you've described, that group leadership way. It takes so much pressure off us as leaders to move into that space, but there's a lot of groundwork and cultural work that needs to be done to get that functional, I think. And I worry sometimes here even that we've missed a step in the readiness for that, to help people step into those roles and to help leaders who were the all-encompassing leader up until several years ago, and now we're asking them to share and distribute and build capacity, and it's just a 180. So it's about supporting that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how often do we bring things like Indigenous leadership styles or family type of leadership? Do we see that they may have a place in what we're learning at university? Because I certainly didn't. I learned a lot of things, but I didn't learn about other leadership styles, which I think that if your community is supporting, and I think probably post-pandemic, I had a lot of thought about, well, how do we talk about well-being and so on? Surely that comes into leadership, but Indigenous communities have been doing this for a very long time. Asian communities, family comes first, your faith comes first, everybody rallies in to support you. Those have always existed. Isn't it about time that we try to see if they have any relevance to us understanding leadership from cultures that are economically less well off than our own?
Yeah. I love that idea, because I feel that we treat work as disconnected sometimes from our humanity at times, and that we almost are, you close your door and you go to work, but that family and everything is so separate, and you sort of go into a different persona, but you don't, because you're bringing all of those values and what you have from your family and how you want to work and how you want to be in the world. That's who's rocking up to work. So there's a depth in that maybe that we're losing out on, that in what you're saying. I think that's really important for us to think about. And I think from Indigenous leadership, I recently, well, maybe a year ago or a bit more, had the privilege of getting to know some Maori colleagues and hearing their value system and hearing their views and hearing how they see the importance of leadership and how they saw leadership as really being important for community was just humbling and incredible to learn from. And I'm still thinking about it now. There is so much that we can learn, I think, if we're open.
And at the moment, I'm working on looking at ethical leadership as a way to give access to all Rohingya children toward getting education, because at the moment you have a refugee crisis in Bangladesh because of the Rohingyas coming into Bangladesh. And I love what Sheikh Hasina, who's the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, has said. She said, I'm already an overpopulated country. Another thousands of people that come in is fine. And, she was just wonderful about it. But it's a difficult place to be, because what do you do with these children who essentially have been expelled from their own country. You have to educate them. You have to grant their children a safe space, place to play and grow, to be nurtured. So when I went home to Bangladesh in December, I went to BRAC Institute of Education. BRAC is the largest NGO in the world, founded by Dr. Abid, who is knighted by the Queen. And they were talking to me. It was fascinating. I learned things I never knew. Said, well, we are actually trying to uphold their own culture, not impose ours. So they're very artistic, these children. And so we made sure we made canopies and things like that and awnings, and the camp, because they live in camps, they're decorated with images that they would remember from their home. I thought that was amazing that actually ethical leadership is starting to be in place there, or if not already in place, that these children are given the respect and that they are really working toward, we value your culture, you're not expelled from a country and you have to learn ours. But again, it's not easy. It's a difficult situation because you have new refugees coming in all the time. You've got camps that are not always very well established, sanitation, women, men, jobs. It is a crisis, a humanitarian crisis. But within that, they're following the UN thing of education for all, free education for everyone. So this is something that they fervently believe in, and they are a large NGO, and they really, really want to make the Rohingya children feel that their culture is important. Will they ever go back to their own country? It's uncertain.
And of course, as you say, it is really, really complex, and it is really complicated. But there is something, that example that you've used, there's something so beautiful about the openness of that. And it's really a seeing of the other, isn't it? And just a real welcome with open arms.
Yes.
And I think when you think about leadership, and, there's so many, I suppose, if we go back to that idea about there being the 25 words for leadership in Bengali, what we do in English is use that adjectival leadership piece, really, isn't it? We put a word in front of leadership, which changes the meaning. But I suppose really we talk about that then is, it's almost like you're now talking about a model of leadership rather than necessarily, kind of values that underpin it. And what does that mean for it's like the how we do it rather than the what it really is and what it encompasses, But I think there's a piece around if just returning to distributed leadership. I know, some people are for it and some people are against it, and some people are somewhere in the middle. It's definitely one of those ones that's created lots of conversation and debate. But I think something that's fantastic about the work of Spillane and colleagues is opening that discourse around leadership as a practice. So instead of it just being whether you are a fan of it or not, I think that idea of the practice of leadership rather than necessarily all the conversations being about the leader is definitely a movement in the right direction. Because even if it's not a form of shared leadership that we're talking about, leadership is part of the community. Even just leadership in the school, if we just talk about that, it's still part of the community. The community impacts it impacts the community. So I think that's a real
and then
strength.
You've used that word, community.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can't exclude that.
Not at all.
Even in your work, you have a community. You have relationships with your colleagues where you will step in if something goes wrong or something. But I would like to think that there's something of the heart in there, not because it's your job to do it, that you want to help out this colleague. So
there's a sense of being in it together, that if you are okay, you may be in the leadership role for a piece, but there's a whole community or a group or a school or a department or whomever that are all part of that. Leadership works in relationship with other people. It doesn't If you're on your own, what are you leading? You know, it's very much contextual in that space. So I think that's a pretty important thing to think about as well. And it is a practice that, I mean, we talked about this before, but I always recommend to my students when they're researching with me, my postgrads, to read Parker Palmer's work, The Courage to Teach, because I do think it's it's such an enlightening book. And he says in it, we teach who we are. But then I was thinking about, well, if that's the case, especially in education leadership, we lead who we are as well. So our values, the way that we feel about the good work that we should be doing is all bound up in how we approach our world and how we approach other people. So that's why I'm struck by that openness to others and to other ways of doing it from Indigenous communities, or taking it from our family and taking the strength so that we come together when there's need.
Yeah.
That's the way we need to be. That is what's going to counteract maybe some of the tough stuff that we're seeing in society at the moment, I think.
I also wanted to ask you if you've heard of the Dabbawala in India, if you know what that is.
No.
In India and in Bangladesh, you would have your lunch cooked at home. You might have domestic staff, or usually, again, your wife maybe at home cooking. So you'd have, I don't know if you've seen those three-tiered sort of boxes. They're called tiffin boxes. So you would have lunch in maybe a vegetable in one, a meat in another, and maybe a sweet dish. And it closes with handles, and it's 3 layers. So the Dabbawala, and there's a documentary on this, and Harvard Business School studies them, they will deliver your lunchbox. So they'll come to the home, pick up your lunchbox. They'll do it with other homes as well. It goes to the train station, then it goes to the station where maybe the city is, where everyone's working. So a lot of these people do live on the outskirts of the city, and they will deliver the lunch to Mrs. A, has sent lunch for Mr. A, and it's delivered to him. What's amazing is that these are people who do not have formal education. They don't earn very much at all, but they have all these tiffin boxes, which they go a little bit by color code. I'm not sure exactly. There's a few other things, but very, very basic. They deliver thousands of tiffin boxes every day. They make less than one mistake in every 6 million deliveries. And we're talking about basic, like if you think about what we have here, Deliveroo, we do it on the app, we download everything. They have none of that. No computers, nothing. They just know that, Neve, you've got the yellow tiffin box, and it is going to your husband over there in the office, and it's going to be delivered on time. And not only that, it's going to be taken away as well when you've finished and delivered back to the home, because having fresh food cooked from home, because it's a long working day, is very important. They provide this service. I think it costs about £10 a month. And how it works, so I'm so interested, is that they are highly valued. Their status is highly valued in their culture. They love what they do. They're self-employed, no formal education, 0-hour working contract, but such a positive working culture. And how amazing is that? That they each know they've got to deliver this. There's no competition, nothing. They're leading with their tiffin boxes, delivering them. And it is just the most amazing food delivery system. And it's called the Dabbawala.
Yeah.
And that's what they're called. And they'll have it, on a cycle. You'll have all these tiffin boxes, and they're delivered to never a mistake. I mean, just amazing. So here we have, in modern times, this very basic form of leadership, which works. And they're happy with it. And they're respected it's part of their culture. What a wonderful thing to see.
It sounds amazing. I'm definitely going to start looking at that after this. It sounds absolutely amazing. I have an instinct, but why do you think there are so little mistakes? I'm so impressed with that.
I like to think that when you don't have any education, and that's not saying that because you don't have any education that you're not smart. It's that other things kick in that for us we could, because we're dependent on this, on that.
Yeah.
They're not. They have a different system of thinking, and they'll know this box belongs to this person. This, even if it's 40 or 50 houses that they collect from, they just know. And it's also kind of like handed from, okay, I'm doing this, my son will do this. Because you're also restricted by the fact that you're never going to make a lot of money, but it's a skill that you pass on. Probably similar to, I don't know where you're both from. Do you have those sort of traditional skills that are really nicely sort of still thriving and preserved? I mean, I think that's the closest I can sort of explain this to.
Yeah. But I also think when you value something, when it's important and you see it as important and you respect it, and it's it's seen as a really important piece of how all of this community and culture works in order for people to be able to work and to be healthy and to live better. Then when you value that, you're not going to make the mistakes because you're paying attention to what's important. And there's a piece in that too that I really like. That maybe in all the distraction that we have, the phones and the computers and the everything, that it distracts us from that simple presence of the most important thing, nourishment and care and looking after ourselves and our loved ones, which is really special. Yeah. So
there's
I'm very impressed with that.
There's a pride in that work too, though, isn't it? Like knowing that you are caring for others, and like even that piece, Bidita, that you said that it's kind of often passed on in the family as well.
Yes.
That's huge in contributing to that pride that you have around what you do.
Yeah. And we've talked about this even in here in my family, about having pride in your work and pride in what you do, no matter what it is, that you do it to your best, that you like it and that you respect it. And so that brings you back into the presence, like in the Eckhart Tolle kind of way. It brings you in to the presence of the now of what you're doing. I'm not sure I think we could be losing a bit of that in our society. So I think it's important to hold on to it. It would be something we would chat about a lot here in this house.
And there is a film, and I forget the name, is it Lunchbox or something, where they actually use this for a romance where, would you believe, the wrong lunchbox got to
it's the one in a million. It's the one in a million.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Good outcome. I must look for it.
Highly valued status in culture. They really are. And the Dabawallahs are just, people say this is part of our city. This is who they are. We don't want to move to technology and all. We're fine the way it is. And it's become embedded in culture. So, I mean, how wonderful that thriving without sort of necessarily learning about, well, how, who's leading this, who's doing it just works. And it's worked for generations.
Yeah, it's iterative and organic and just comes together and to fill a need, which I think is possibly how the best leadership emerges, actually, rather than this artificial imposition of it, which I think that's really interesting. Yeah, it's cool.
It really gets you thinking about what is it that we value.
Yeah,
in our work and in our lives. And I mean, that's huge for leadership, isn't it? Like what, that's the whole vision piece, the whole purpose piece. But like, besides that, when you're talking about expressing that value as well, like you were saying, Bidita, that the people that work in that service are really highly regarded. And then, of course, like that being fed back to you and that being shown to you increases your desire to engage with the work again. You know what I mean? So there's a piece around like being very explicit about what it is that's important to us, and also showing that we value that and our appreciation towards it, isn't it?
And how do we contextualize that at the heart of leadership, your family and your community can influence the way you lead?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So. Yeah. But I don't think we give that any credence, really. We just, although there was a really interesting thing this morning. So somebody had put up a Twitter post about a St. Bridget's cross. I don't know if you know, Bidita, what that is, but it's a saint in Ireland, and you create this cross shape out of rushes, out of reeds, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It's lovely. And this woman had put one up, and she talked about her mother and the values that her mother would have and how kind and generous she was. And it reminded me of my father. And I tweeted back to say, well, I'd love one because I don't have the skill to make it. When you talk about the tradition of making things, I need to learn how to make one, and how much it had reminded me of the pieces, the good pieces that my father had brought that I now carry in my life. And so it was like a moment in time where you were looking at tradition and seeing what it meant about the people, the family who had influenced how you are. So it's similar, I think. It was really beautiful today.
One of the trainings I did, we had outside on the playground, we drew a sort of a very basic world map, and everybody got to stand on the world map, and we were talking about, okay, where were you born? And then people would move to a certain, so from your career, where have you come to? Which country? And this was when I was working in Bangladesh at an international school. And it was really interesting the way in which people move from one place to another. Mm-hmm. And then we brought it down to, okay, in your work, if you were looking at how you've moved in terms of your expertise in your subject, how does it look like to you? I mean, for me, it's like a bit random. It's not like this, where it's not going up. I really don't like that pyramid scheme, because after, knowing about my culture a little bit more, and like the Dabawal, I just think, wow, there's a whole world out there where we need to learn how people, because we think about, I should do this job and then I'll earn this much, and then if I can go up, I'll earn more. But here are people who are actually, like you said, Patricia, happy with what they've got. Need like that culture. This is where we belong, and we're going to do this, and it's fine. And you can learn from us. What can you learn? To be happy with what you have and just carry on.
Yeah, and to contribute to your community by providing something that people will value and appreciate. I think that's just the best. That's the high bar, isn't it? To be doing that kind of work where it's appreciated and valued. Yeah, that's really great.
There's such a lesson in that piece around being happy with, when you're doing something that you're doing good work, you're contributing, you're caring for others, and just being happy in that space. And I think sometimes people, when you say kind of that idea about being happy with where you're at or with what you've got, I suppose in the world of work that we're in, I suppose it can look or feel like you're not ambitious then, but it's not to say that you're not open to learning. Like, being content and being happy doesn't mean you're closed off.
Yeah.
It still means you're very much open to that. And I think, that I know lots of people have spoken about that before, but I suppose that idea of looking at the next thing and the next thing without, learning the lessons that are to be learned, and contributing and playing your role and being open in the moment is everything.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes you can be in a position of privilege and try to do good with your position and leadership for society. So in Bangladesh, Dr. Yunus, who won the Nobel Prize with the Grameen Bank, had a very simple concept. I'm going to give loans. He was a friend of my father's. I'm going to give small loans to village women so they can buy a sewing machine, so they can make some clothes, they can sell it. It'll be a loan because that's a good thing, because then they'll work to pay it back, and that's a good discipline with zero interest, really. And it just built into the empire that is now BRAC. Wow. But interestingly, he was of the opinion that, because he was asked, why do you want to give the money to the women? He said, because women are more responsible. And he noted that. And with some of the, issues of maybe domestic violence, so on, the husbands actually thought, my wife is earning, I better be nice to her. It's really more money. But, from that culture, he actually went to he didn't say, okay, things have to change here. You can never get bank loan because you don't have the education. He actually said, this woman, these ladies have talent. Let me help them. Let me build. So there have been so many women that have been advantaged by this, and men now, that they've built their small sort of business he empowered them to do that, and it's just wonderful that he was recognized for his work. I think it's a great thing. It takes a lot of courage, and that's coming down and thinking, I can do this. I have the education. I have the means. Let me do this, and he did it, and he did it successfully. He's Hillary Clinton is his friend, President Obama. I mean, he's invited everywhere because here's this humble man who had this vision. And what a great leader that is.
Yeah, I love that because it's courageous. There's risk in it. There's risk taking. You're going to give loans and think, will they be paid back or not? But it's generous in saying, I'm not going to exploit that they have to pay big interest. I'm going to use it to support the economy, but to support the growth of women in the economy as well. I just love that. I think that's incredible. And visionary. It's visionary leadership. And it's really grassroots type of leadership, isn't it? To be able to see the problem and to see how I can leverage and go against the grain, because the expectation is you would, be loaning at a certain interest rate, and you would be, contributing to the bank or the company by making all of these. And instead you're saying, no, the wider need of my country is greater, and for the women at home. And
like the Ugandans who were expelled, the personality that came out of these expelled Ugandans was entrepreneurial, but with family.
Okay. Yeah.
We're in a terrible situation. We've just got to grit our teeth. We've got to get on with it. I remember, was it the man who did the Colorama photograph company owner? And he and his son would go around in the 70s and actually pick up the reels of the spools of photographs and develop them and deliver them and build a huge empire from that, because it wasn't about, I need a holiday, we're very set with our times, this is when we take. They didn't have that. The concept of family was so important. And I think sometimes that's such a big, huge driving motivation in success.
Yeah. And we do, like, when you think about leaders, in whatever shape or form or whatever stage, you do tend to think of the individual as well, don't you? Whereas the reality, like you said it at the start of the conversation, but that piece about forgetting the influence that the family and community can have on that leader, I mean, that's huge. There's no greater influence on an individual than the people that you're, coming home to in the evening.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I always say things like, I know we've said this together, but I feel if you do a PhD or you do a master's or you do something, your family own it, actually. It's not just you, because they have invested and supported. And then when you've been studying, they've been bringing you the cups of tea, or they've been making sure the dinner gets done, or they give their time and they listen to you and they go out for the walks with you and encourage you when you think you're not going to finish it, and do all the stuff they do to allow you to do it. I feel they have part ownership in it. I can never say it's mine. It's not my PhD, it's ours, and contributes to the growth of your family. Even that alone, I know that's a privileged example, but it is an example of how things are not as individual as we speak about them. There's something else going on behind them, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering, Bidita, this is a massive question, but I'm wondering, what do you think, no matter how kind of big and blue skies thinking or small it is, what are you thinking we should be doing, or what should we be thinking about in order to expand the way that we're looking at all these things? Because I know we've spoken about it before this conversation, but I often think about you and your work and your interest in this area, and thinking of how do we try and communicate what it is that we're talking about with one another? I mean, and I know I say this in my distributed leadership work all the time, but we're often talking about different things. It's what can we be doing, or what should we be thinking about to try and move forward in this space?
A very good icebreaker is International Night. We're lucky because we've got 30, 40 nationalities, and they bring the dish of their country where they're from. And if you happen to be all from the same place, we put names, flags in a bowl, and you are responsible for creating a very simple dish of that country. Food, I feel food is like the Dabawala, they deliver food. Food is culturally so important. It brings people together. And I know it's unconventional, but I think that's a great way to break the ice and really talk about cultures, and from there move on to leadership. I just like that idea of, well, how do we bring people together? What do you ask them? Where are you from? Oh, I was like, where are you from? Well, I was born in Bangladesh, which is, if you know, it's right next to India. Oh, India. I love Indian food.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and the chicken korma is now a British dish. So how interesting is that? So I think simple, less is more.
Yeah. I love what you're saying there, Bidita. And funnily enough, my partner, he's a primary school teacher, and it's a couple of months ago now, I suppose, but they did that type of night in their school. So there was parents and students coming that had made a dish, from their own cuisine and brought it. And he said it was the most fabulous night. And there was such a nice buzz around the place. So it's funny that that's, a suggestion, because it's something we had spoken about recently. But what I love about that is, it's first and foremost, you're thinking about how do you connect people?
Yes.
Like regardless of where it is that you're going from there, how do you bring people together and connect?
In our international night, everybody has a flag, their dish, and the parents are like, well, this is from Finland. This is a type of bread that we make. Please try it. They're so happy to share this important food from their country. And I just think that this is a really good way to break the ice, because we, and being an English teacher, how food is represented in fiction is very interesting, very varied. So in real life, we, over a meal, over a drink, food really breaks the ice, I feel. And I think that's as you said, in your partner's primary school, what a wonderful thing to do, because it teaches the children about food from different parts of the world, but also as a way to understand different cultures. So I just really like that idea, and we've done that a couple of times here and also in Bangladesh. And also my friend who is now a doctor, she just passed her PhD in University of Idaho, and she said they never had an international night, and I brought Bangladesh food, and it was a great way for people to be curious, because you're tasting something, grandma's recipe, certain smells. Oh, I remember that. Food is a very emotional connection, and there is a link to leadership. I think this is a first step to really making people feel comfortable, and then talking about, okay, you go out, you branch out. It's just wonderful to do that. And I think we sometimes miss the heart of what are those basic human connections we need to start with. Yes, food is a good one.
I'm thinking I'm saying, oh my God, food is becoming like a culture language. And I really like that. Absolutely love that. And, I always say, because my research field has been a lot of the time in bullying and incivility. And I always say, if you know someone, you can't bully them, or you're not uncivil to them if you know them and you like them. And if you like them and you like their food and you see their excitement in sharing their food, it just opens up a space to be together, It's much harder to be mean when you're in that space. I think we should be doing a lot more of that. Yeah, I agree. I think it's great.
Very unconventional answer, I know.
I like it. No, I really like it, actually. I'm kind of,
because it's so culturally linked.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And we just relax. There is an emotionality in it. We sit down, there's something about the process of eating that opens the human spirit a little bit. And so there's a largesse that comes into us when we're sitting at the table chatting and having a little drink of whatever it is, but eating some food and being nourished. Isn't that what it is, really? It's being nourished.
It is. And in Bangladesh, so hospitable. Everyone is so hospitable, in the sense you go to the house, they'll just feed you everything. Food is so important. And one of the things I learned there was that even if they were economically disadvantaged, if you go to their home, please come in and have some chai, which is tea. So that hospitality, food unites. Food is so important in the subcontinent, in Indian culture, Pakistan, Bangladesh. food recipes handed down to me by my mother, how she used to make something, kind of like folk tales, you just hand down, just handed down.
Yeah.
Can we hand down leadership like that?
Yeah, that's true. You're making me really want to go. I have to tell you, that's the first thing I'm like, because I am out for my tea and I love my food. so that's part of it. But you're right, actually, we do hand down leadership like that too. I didn't think of it like that, but we do. You're spot on about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We sort of lead from how we've seen it done before. When you're thrown in, you describe being thrown in at the deep end, and it's literally like, okay, sink or swim now. Just and it's difficult when you're taking over when there's a difficulty when the other person just hasn't retired happily or something has changed, that you're just almost like a schism in you coming in if somebody has left. And then you have to make the space to work in that way. You'll draw on what you know from what you've seen before, and the stuff that you think was good and the stuff that you think was really bad, you will avoid, we hope. But we need to think more widely and open up our space to see different ways of doing it, I think.
From my training as a workshop leader, and I trained in Chiang Mai, Thailand, I'll never forget my first day at training, and we were to create a unit to teach to fifth graders, just like 9-year-olds. But we were sent out into downtown Chiang Mai, and we were to pick up something cultural, something about food, and we needed to create a unit, could be anything we like, that brought in those cultural elements. And I thought, what has this got to do with us? A lot younger than what has this got to do with, I'm supposed to be a workshop leader, don't I need to read curriculum and books? That, of course, came, but I realized that my Thai instructor was just brilliant, because that opened up to me looking at the IB documents and actually understanding that idea of what it means to be, what it is to be international, but that the definition is not fixed. And so let's start with, because you're going to be training teachers from all over the world. So create me a curriculum, choose anything you like of here in Thailand, and build that unit of study. And it was wonderful. I think ours was something like from shop to table. So we looked at ways in which we could get, what do we buy in the market that we could bring to the table? What about other things? How do we create how do we understand about work and ethics and so on? It was a long time ago, but I really enjoyed it. And I thought, what a brilliant way to start a workshop leadership. I was prepared for learning and reading documents, but I was sent out to have a coffee, to enjoy local food and cuisine, with the purpose of my group and I together creating this unit of study.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And in Chiang Mai, of all places, I mean, fabulous food markets in Chiang Mai, when you think about it, lots to choose from. Amazing. Yeah,
but that other stuff will come, won't it? You know what I mean? I think that's the important work, I think, isn't it? Like, and it's just about finding, like, we need to find ways in which to open up all of these conversations more, don't we? Because, like, I'm thinking about Joe Owen that also joined us for a fabulous conversation, and he was talking about how, you know, you learn from your experience, and a bit of what you were saying there, Patricia, you know, things that you've seen done, and then also saying about opening up that space and trying to look out further with, you know, reading or whatever it is, listening to podcasts, those types of things. But like, when so much of the content, the leadership content that's out there is, you know, that kind of Anglo-American piece, like, it's about finding ways in which we're looking outside that, aren't we? And gaining all the other insight, all the other incredible insight that's out there, and finding ways to do that.
The chapter I read the most is Michael Fullan's The Moral Purpose of Leadership. I read that a lot, just to kind of ground me in certain things. Because I think that's such an important chapter. But also, I think like this because, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm heavily dyslexic. So I think of the world differently.
Okay.
I think of ways in which I can understand it. And so I don't hide it anymore. Before I was like, oh my God, I can't speak. I can't do this. If I have to read a book, I have to I just see words. I don't see sentences. What do I do? So now, I mean, obviously you have your coping strategies, and I'm so glad that I found out that John F. Kennedy was also dyslexic. That made me feel good. So, you have to just accept that this is who I am, and other people will just have to say, I'm sorry, this is how I am, but we'll get through. And so my thinking is, how do I learn best? What are my strategies in place? It's not always first to go to the book. It's visual, it's something else, it's a color code, it's a map. And from there, the fact that I've been able to do 2 master's degrees, it wasn't easy because you have to think of these strategies quite a lot. Yeah. And also when you're speaking, you have to try and not fumble, but it's very difficult because you have to think back in order to think forward. So there's little things that you do, in place. But I just think that shouldn't we accept the world for its warts and all?
I agree.
And that's why shouldn't we look at leadership for things that, okay, it's great to learn about Horatio Nelson, but I would like to know about the Lascars who were at the sort of the bulk at the bottom of the ship when they were, going to different countries, and they were just there driving. What was their leadership like there? Who led? Who was the chief oarsman? How did that work?
Yeah.
Those kind of things. So I just think that there are different ways we can look at things, and leadership, certainly we should be looking at it from, there are benefits to all. I think I've learned a lot, but I've also learned what's missing. And that's a good thing, because that's what research is about. And I'm sure, Niamh, that even though you've completed your doctorate, that there are so many other things that you could have added or you think about. And you think,
stop. Yeah. I remember being in the PhD and saying that to Patricia. You remember that piece that I did at the start would have done totally differently before I'd even finished, not to mine now. For sure.
But that's
the
the
fact
point.
that you're both open and it's just, this is it. This is a start. This is good.
Yeah. And I like that it's we're inclined to think in that hierarchical at the top, and you use the phrase the pyramid, just like that, that pyramid way of thinking, but we are inclined to lean into thinking about the leader is at the top, even though we say it's more shared and distributed, we still sort of hold that space. But you're challenging that very strongly in a good way. You're talking about leadership from within, in whatever area is important, and they all are. I mean, you're talking about that ship, the person in the hull, the person in all of that is, it's what's keeping it going, and is probably showing leadership among the team that they're working in as well in different ways. So, and I'm on this piece about that. I'm afraid that we're getting a little bit too attached to being a bit formulaic about leadership education. I'm just going to talk about that for a minute. So it's the papers and the books and write the essays and produce the learning outcomes and stick to the rubric, and we all live happily ever after. And we're missing so much more if we're stuck to the covering of content in the way that we're beginning to think about it. And sometimes it's good to just be present and listen to the experience, like Paulo Freire would say, take the wisdom that's within the group and use that as the basis for which the learning is going to occur. Because that's what my PhD supervisor did with me. We used to meet at weekends, all of us, and we'd meet in a group. But she didn't have set pieces that she was going to lecture at you with. She might have a theme that she would bring. It might be about justice, or, it might be talking about John Rawls or whomever. But we would just talk about that and interrogate that. Then the expectation was you would go away and do your reading and do your searching and do your thinking and come back with it. But you weren't sitting there with the pen out, taking all the notes from the font of wisdom and then reproducing it. So I think we have a bit of work to do in that space now, which I think you're challenging us about.
It's evolving. We evolve. The world evolves. We use vocabulary now that we would have used differently 20, 30 years ago. We need to see leadership in the same way.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. But there's a bit of courage in it to just be able to trust that you have enough knowledge yourself to go into that space and sit and be present. Because you do. That's the piece, but yeah, so I'm thinking about that a lot at the moment. And our conversation is just doubling down on that. It's making me think, yeah, let's look more widely and look at practice and look at what's happening in other areas, in Indigenous communities, in family, in all around us, to see what that can teach us about leadership. It might help people more.
Yeah, and just walk outside and get lost in it and experience it, and come back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we talked to a colleague. We're going to interview him in a few weeks, but he runs a very large hospitality kind of piece. But he talked about when he's hiring people to work, they're not looking for they don't want bodies, arms and legs, like the way that people talk, but they want somebody who'll contribute to the culture and share ideas about leadership and see themselves as being a leader themselves, whether that's working in the bar or it's working in the restaurant or whether it's in a managerial position, that everybody sees themselves in that way, that's what contributes to a sort of a happy place to work. Very struck with that.
And I would hate leadership to be somebody, let's say at the top, and you're sort of in the middle rung or at the bottom. I want us to move away from my job is at stake, my salary, those sort of things, that those should not be impediments to thinking that you can't express to your leader perhaps something you're not, as long as you keep the conversation relevant to the topic. You're not going into personalities. You're basically talking about something perhaps that you weren't happy with, but that is specific to that point, but without fear or judgment.
Yeah.
And this is where perhaps generative conversations are really important, where you set aside, who am I? I'm Neve. I'm not a PhD. I am just me. Talk to me as me.
Mm-hmm.
So, because that way you sort of step outside of, you have all the knowledge, you have, but you're leaving that. And I'm just talking to you as a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have such a person-centered way of being. That's it's infectious, like talking to you. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm wondering, as kind of a closing question, like you've kind of shared, Bidita, throughout the conversation this a bit, but I'm wondering just like, what are your hopes for leadership?
Well, that leadership is understood much more fully through culture, through beliefs, through faith. These things are very important because we carry them with us. We may carry all three. We may carry two. We may carry one. But when I was working briefly with the IB think tank about how do we teach children in areas of conflict, it was one of the things that really stayed with me. Because we carry that with us. So I would like to have a leadership that acknowledges that, yes, textbooks are important. Leadership, Western leadership is important. It teaches us a lot. But we need to go back to those who have done it longer than us, such as the Maoris, Aboriginal indigenous population. Well, how have they survived so long? The Native Americans. Let's go back to thinking deeply about culture, thinking deeply about beliefs and values. How do we negotiate those in positions of leadership, or if we want to lead? How do we take those with us? How do we get somebody else to understand that from us? How do I understand you? Those things are important. We live in such a technology-oriented world. It's, as we are now, that personal human connection is very important. I think it was Geoffrey Chaucer said long time ago. He said that time changes. You'll have buildings, you'll have things to make your life easier, but human habits do not change. They stay the same. And I think if we can nurture that, respect people's culture, beliefs, values going forward. I'd like to see more of that in leadership. I'd like to see more of that coming through. And if we can, then that's a good step forward.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant because we are in a time of just global migration, huge change. And it's the way it's going to be. So the traditional ways of leading may need to be rethought because we need to be able to meet the changing nature of our society and our workplaces. And that's to be inclusive, because there's so much gained in being inclusive than there is from just simply one way of doing it. So yeah.
And now I don't have a doctorate yet, but I would like to pick the brains of both of you. I mean, that's a great thing. We need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you learned. Tell me because I want to see how that also shapes my thinking. So it's a partnership.
Yeah. And I think opening up that space between and I think we're beginning to do that certainly in our leadership group in our school, which I'm so privileged to work in. Like we are reaching out and trying to meet people and speak to people and learn and share and just have as open a way of engaging with each other as possible. And it's working, going to things like Belmas where we met first and connecting, not just about the conference, but about the people and sharing ideas and presence together is just really important. I mean, presence and being present. There was no presence.
I want to visit
exchange.
your part of the world.
You would be so welcome, Bidita, and you would like it here.
Absolutely.
I have to say, I think you'd really enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah, anytime, for sure. Bidita, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you. I've really loved this. I'm going to go into my weekend now full of energy, I think.
And for me too, Bidita, you've got me thinking, and you've just put me on a tangent. You really have. And I'm so glad when someone does that. I'm like, yes, and you have just done it because I do feel the pieces around maybe moving differently, moving the dial on where we're looking for information about leadership, moving into looking at Indigenous cultures, looking at family, looking at other relationships for what they can teach us about leadership. I'm going to do it. I just really feel inspired by it. So I'm very grateful for that today. It's really cool.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to see you in Scotland, aren't we, in June? You're going to Belmas, are you?
July.
Yeah.
July.
Yes.
Gosh, Jeannie.
Definitely.
Jeez, you want to check your flights?
I want to check my flights, my calendar. Yeah, and it'll be great. We really look forward to that as well.
Brilliant. I mean, we'll definitely be connecting before then, but it's lovely to know that we'll be catching up there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bidita, thank you so much.
All right.
Continued. Yeah, thank you so much.
Please keep in touch. Bye.